my December 2021 wrap-up. The first book I want to talk about, because I realized I did not write it down, and that was Home to Holly Springs by Jan Karon. This is the 10th in her Mitford series, and unfortunately this book was a complete miss for me, and I kind of knew that before I had even read the book. This book is not set in Mitford. Father Tim travels to his hometown of Holly Springs, Mississippi, and it is a dual narrative in that it jumps back to these scenes from his childhood and then to the present, where he's going around trying to find out who sent him this anonymous letter from Holly Springs. And I knew, just because what I love about the Mitford series is this setting of Mitford. And also because of different things from Father Tim's past, I knew this was going to be a bit more hard-hitting and just not kind of what I'm searching for when I read a Mitford book. And so it's done. I skim read it. I didn't even really fully read it, but I'm very excited to continue on with this series. And it's really fun with my co-hosts, Chelsea, Rainey, and Angie. Each month we meet to do a live show, and we're going to continue that on. We have 4 books left for the new year, and just really excited to carry on with that. Then I finally read Betsy and Joe by Hart Lovelace. I have very, very slowly this year been rereading the Betsy Tacy series with Rainey from Rainy Day Reads, and we have just been loving, slowly savoring these books. And Betsy and Joe, it can be a bit of a stressful one, because there is somewhat of a love triangle with 2 boys vying for Betsy's attentions. But I just try to, that part of the book can really stress me out, because I am very biased with this love triangle. I want her to be with Joe so badly. And I just try to lean into all the other aspects of it, the family aspects. I adore the Ray family so much, and all of the spending time with friends and what is going on in her classes and events at school. There's a lot to do with football in the fall, and just it felt so high schoolish. And I love this series. And does Betsy always make the best decisions? No. But does that make her more relatable? It does indeed. So I love this series. It is no secret. And a bit at the end that I love is there is a speech. The person says, after commencement day, what? And then later on, she's walking around with Joe, and he says, after commencement day, what? Of course, said Betsy. That's what we've been talking about. I've got the answer, Joe said. After commencement day, Betsy. He smiled and looked enormously pleased with himself. How does that sound? So Joe Willard is just the ultimate catch to me in any book. He even tops Gilbert Blythe, and Gilbert Blythe is amazing, but just Joe Willard is it for me as far as guys in books. He tops them all. So I'm really, really excited to carry on, because Betsy's Wedding, which is the last book in the series, after Betsy and the Great World, is my favorite. So I did read Carney's House Party, which is a little shorter book in between Betsy and Joe and Betsy and the Great World. And so it'll be so fun this next year to read Betsy and the Great World and Betsy's Wedding, and then also to read Emily of Deep Valley as the initial book in my Kindred Spirits book club. And I am leading a Zoom discussion of that, and it's been so lovely to hear from Kindred Spirits in my email that are interested in participating in the Zoom discussion, or just reading along more casually if they're a bit more shy. And I will just say again, if you are shy, but you like the idea of at least hearing the discussion, you could attend with your camera off, and you could talk in the chat if you wanted to. But yeah, it's not like you have to attend with your camera on, and that is the only way to do it. There's some variety in there, so some variation. So yes, cannot wait to just carry on with more Hart Lovelace goodness. Now, I also then read from her, it's a little Christmas story called The Trees Kneel at Christmas. Now, this story is not anything extraordinary. It's very simple. And it is based on a Syrian legend where on Christmas Eve at midnight, the trees kneel. And it was just so sweet. And so I think if you have adored Hart Lovelace's writing and you're wanting a pretty simplistic kind of Christmas story, you will enjoy this. It didn't take me very, very long. It took me, I think, a couple hours to read it. And it's what I really enjoyed about it was the family dynamics in this. And it made me want to try all of the Syrian food because they kept referencing all of these different things that they cooked. So maybe in the new year, one of my goals will be to try some different Syrian dishes and see how I fare with them, because so much sounded good. And there was a lot of different food that was referenced. Then I just had a lot of fun with my Christmas reads this year. I listened to an audiobook version of Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I listened to this with my boys, and I think that's what made it so fun, because Peter especially was just so excited to keep listening. And J.R.R. Tolkien, for years, he wrote letters to his children as if he were Father Christmas, and the world building that is in here, like, I just love that this is by the same man that wrote the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and just all of the Middle Earth, folklore and mythology that he created. Like, it's so apparent in this very whimsical and fantastical world that Father Christmas lives in. And there is a polar bear who is the North Polar Bear, and there are lots of elves and lots of mischief that happens at the North Pole, and it was incredibly just fun. And such love went into these stories. So I felt so honored that I would be able to get to read these letters that he wrote to his children, kind of these love letters to his children, and just so endearing. Then a bit of a downer was Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie. I mean, as far as Poirot goes, it was a middling one, but I really wanted more Christmas. And it is called Hercule Poirot's Christmas, and it is not nearly Christmassy enough. The only thing that is Christmassy about it is that it is set at Christmas time. Are there any Christmas preparations mentioned? No, there are not. Is there Christmas food mentioned? No, there is not. So what I really wanted was The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, because that one is so good and doesn't take you long at all to read it. So I didn't end up having time to read that one because I was so distracted by other mysteries for Cloak and Dagger Christmas, but I very much next Christmas will be rereading The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding. Then I read, as a reread with my Patreon group, we voted for December to be the Christmas Hirelings, the December book, to be the Christmas Hirelings by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. This is a very short and sweet Christmas story about an old curmudgeon and about some children that come to stay with him to sort of jolly him along at Christmas time. And there is lots of Christmas festivities and some really sweet children that are characters in it. And it is just a very short, sweet Christmas novella. And there is a fabulous audiobook narrated by Richard Armitage on Audible, if that interested you. Now, a real highlight for me was I finally read The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. I have never read this. This was such a popular book when I was a kid, so I don't know how it was that I never read it then. I listened to the audiobook of this, and this was just, I loved this so much. It was just, it felt like a Beverly Cleary book, and just these really kind of, these kids with tons of personality, and they're not very refined, and just the like humor in this just really tickled me, and I really, really love this book. Now, what I love is there is, I think, a second book after it, but I think the third one is a Halloween one, like the best Halloween ever, so you better believe at Halloween time, that is what I'm going to want to read. I don't know if it will live up to The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, but I just adored this book. So that's going to be a yearly reread for me now, because it's, I think, around 2.5 hours as an audiobook. Not very long at all. So cannot wait to read that again already. And then I read an Agatha Raisin and the Busybody, or just Busybody. Solid Agatha Raisin, lots of romantic drama, and lots of Agatha doing kind of unethical investigating. If you can kind of be okay with those things, then you will enjoy these books. Then I read Footsteps in the Dark. This was the Cloak and Dagger Christmas group read, and it took me by surprise so much. Georgette Hare is an author that I have tried around 5 of her romances, and about 30% through, I just get a little restless because I don't read straight up romances. I read either like historical romances or romantic suspense. it's really going to take a lot for me to like a straight up romance. So I haven't had much success with her romances. And I've tried, I know people are going to name, oh, but you need to try this one. I've tried, like when I ask people for their favorite hair romances, and I have tried 5 of the favorites and just get restless around 30% in. So then I had tried Envious Casca from her as a mystery. So when somebody else picked it to be part of the poll, and I was like, I don't know, how is this going to go? And I loved this so much. This is art from Bookshelf Odyssey. He said this is like a Scooby-Doo episode, and I would say absolutely. I 100% agree with that theory, and this was just delightful. It had really interesting characters, and they show up at this house, and there's mysterious things happening, and secret rooms, and just it was wonderful. So if you want just a mystery that is a whole lot of fun, I recommend this. And also not very creepy. So if you're someone who likes kind of more lighthearted mysteries, this is a great one to read. And then I read Evans Above. This is the first in the Constable Evans series by Rhys Bowen. I wanted to read more Rhys Bowen. I'm going through Her Royal Spyness series with Kate from the novel Nomad, and I wanted to have another series that I could kind of read on a whim, and I loved this so much. It just had such a great small town feel, and there's a pub that everyone in the community goes to regularly. There was a lot of small town gossip. Like if you have seen the show Doc Martin, this felt like Doc Martin. And just adored this book. So I immediately checked out the next one from the library, and I'm hoping to read it before it expires. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I loved this. I read it in a couple of days because it was not very long at all. And then as a buddy read with Olive from a book Olive, I read A Peculiar Combination. This is a new Ashley Weaver series. It is the first in the Electra McDonald series, where she is part of a family that are safecrackers. So I love the really different take. And it's set kind of in the World War II England. So if that's a setting that you like, there are so many mysteries that are that setting. I think you could really enjoy it. Then one that was a complete surprise with how much I fell in love with it was Last Christmas in Paris. This is by Hazel Gaynor, and then I can't remember the other author because it is 2 authors that wrote it, and it is written entirely in letters. And it is set during World War I. It starts out right at the very beginning when one of the main characters starts sending her brother letters, and then when she realizes that her brother's best friend isn't really getting all that many letters, she starts sending him letters as well. So you're hearing these letters back and forth from them, and I was so captivated. But the thing I think that really took it up several notches for me was listening to the audiobook. It is a multicast audiobook, and so each character that is writing letters in this has their own voice actor, and that just made it so splendid. There actually is not a whole lot of actual Christmas in this because wartime is not really a time to have extravagant Christmases. But they do talk about Christmas every year and how they would love it if they could spend a Christmas in Paris. So I think it just felt like Christmassy in that so much of just taking delight in the joys of life, even when everything seems bleak and hopeless, felt very Christmassy, kind of this resilient spirit. So I don't know any other time of the year that I would read it, and I think I might just reread it again next year. We'll see how I feel in a year, but I really, really loved a lot of the Christmassy reading that I did this year. And then a really sweet, long picture book is How Winston Delivered Christmas. And this is set in its 24 stories, so you could read it as an Advent storybook, but it was a new book at the library and several people had hold, so I didn't want to keep it that long. I just kept it for a week to let other people have the joy of it. And what just made this so fun is the artwork in this was just electric. It just popped. And it was such a treat. I would be so excited each day, when I read the piece, to then flip the page and see what beautiful artwork was waiting there for me. It's about a mouse who finds a mislaid letter to Santa, and he takes it upon himself to make sure that Santa gets this letter. And then I did a reread of The Vanderbeekers of 141st Street. I think that's the name of it. I want to go through this series with Peter, doing the audiobooks, because I really like the narrator of these. And he enjoyed this book before when he listened to it, but we had both kind of forgotten a lot, and it takes place at Christmas time. So I thought it would be really fun to start it at Christmas, and I love this possibly even more the second time around. This is just a really classic feeling children's series, and I don't say that about a lot of newer books that have come out. So I highly recommend this. I cannot wait to start the next one, but I definitely want to have an interlude with another Paddington book because now it's been about a month since we've done a Paddington audiobook. So I want to keep making my way through that series. Then I read, and it did not take long, Skipping Christmas by John Grisham. This is the inspiration for the Christmas with the Cranks movie with Tim Allen and Jamie Lee Curtis. And this is a really simple book. I think the movie, I would say most people enjoy the movie even more. There's nothing, amazing about it, but I really enjoyed it while I was listening to it. So I kind of expected it to be exactly what it was going to be, and it delivered. But the movie's really fun as well. So after I finished reading the book, I made sure to watch the movie. And then I finally read an Anna Lee Huber mystery. This I read also for Cloak and Dagger Christmas, The Anatomist's Wife. And I loved this. I will say this was definitely on the border for me as far as kind of like guts and gore in a murder mystery. So I'm a little bit apprehensive. I don't know what the next ones will be like, but it was very intense and graphic, the way the victim was killed. So I'll be curious to see, but also, the whole nature of someone, the main character, her husband was an anatomist. So kind of really a lot of stuff to do with bodies and body parts. I don't know how I'll feel, but I just know I was really on the edge of my seat. This felt really thrillerish. It's set at this house in the country in Scotland, and one of the members of the house party is killed. And so no one is allowed to leave until this investigation is complete, and a magistrate can show up, but it's going to take them several days to get there. So it really had this sense of urgency the entire time that I was reading it. Then, thank you so much to Irene, one of my patrons, and she also has a channel. I will link it down below. She told me about The Night Before Christmas by Gogol, because I had said I'm interested in reading more Russian literature. And this was such an amazing story, and it feels so different from your typical kind of Christmas stories. It is such a departure, and so there is magic and folklore. It is brimming over with magic and folklore, and this kind of sort of darker, kind of haunting, whimsical elements to it. And there's different kinds of whimsical, right? There's like Anne of Green Gables whimsical, but then there's kind of Alice in Wonderland whimsical. So this was darker whimsical, and like Lemony Snicket, it's a different kind of whimsical. And I really loved this. It was just so much fun and charming in its own unique way. So a really short story that I highly recommend anyone reading. And then I did read The Story of Holly and Ivy by Rumer Godden. I got the picture book of this. It is I looked up on Goodreads, if you get the chapter book of this, or this in just regular book format, it's around 50 pages. This was a really sweet story, but I think what really elevated it for me were the Barbara Cooney illustrations. I love her illustrations so much. Miss Rumphius is another picture book that she has illustrated, and I want to look up kind of the other ones that she's illustrated. I know they did a whole episode on Read Aloud Revival about her illustrations. And then I listened to Christmas on Mill Street. This was a really fun, another one that felt very like Beverly Cleary. And this kid has just moved to this new town. He's not used to being around snow. He's moved from Arizona to Utah. And he wants this sled. And Mill Street has this stretch that is really iconic for being very dangerous to sled down, and people don't make it the whole stretch. And it was just so fun. So if you want kind of this all-American feeling children's Christmas story, it's really great. And we listened to the audiobook of it. It had a lot of laugh out loud moments to it. It had some heartwarming moments, so just exactly what I was hoping it was going to be. And then I did read Nancy Ann Plum by Betty McDonald. This is a really sweet children's book that starts at Christmas and ends at Christmas. You go a whole year with these orphans, Nancy and Plum, and their terrible Mrs. Monday, who owns a boarding house, and they live with her, and she's dreadful. And what I love is things really start to turn around from them and all of the attitude that they give Mrs. Monday, because she is like Miss Minchin from A Little Princess. She's awful. Then a wonderful Christmas novella, Holiday by Gaslight by Mimi Matthews. This is becoming a bit of like online book community darling, and for good reason. Just she does so much in so few pages. I think it's 170 pages. It is very much inspired by Gaskell's North and South. It's set at Christmas time though, very romantic. It ticked all the boxes. I read a lot of short things, and I think that's what made the month fun for me, because I wanted some variety, and I just wanted lots of little things to read, and it really did the trick. And then we listened to, on the way to and from going to be with family for Christmas, we listened to The Hobbit, and we listened to Andy Serkis's reading of it. And now that ties in perfectly with The Two Towers, which I finally finished listening to. And I already had the Lord of the Rings audiobooks. I owned them. But as soon as I heard that Andy Serkis had narrated these and I listened to a sample, I thought, well, I mean, the other ones that I owned, they're nice, but they are a bit monotone. And that, I had kind of been in denial about that, but as soon as I heard Andy Serkis's narration, and then I saw an Audible deal for, I think it was half off. Yeah, half off membership for 4 months. That's when I do Audible. I never do full price. And so whenever I see deals like that, that's when I get Audible. So I usually have Audible like once a year or something. And now I own The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I was not anticipating enjoying The Two Towers as much as I did this reread, because before it was my least favorite of the trilogy. And I'll be curious if it still is my least favorite now. But I think one thing that really changed for me was reading This Beautiful Truth by Sarah Clarkson, which is still my favorite book of the year. And in this book, it was honestly life-changing for me, because she shows how in any situation, what you should look for and what you can strive to do in your daily life and the mundane tasks that you are doing is to push back the darkness that's around you and to bring light and to bring beauty and to bring life. And it's just utterly changed how I look at literature. And so these scenes in the second half of the book, which is all Frodo and Sam, and I was like, oh boy, here we go, Frodo and Sam. But to see it's like I'm going to get emotional just thinking about it, how they are so focused on the long game. And they know that in the midst of all the suffering that they're doing, this task they have to do will be pushing back the immense darkness that is around them, and how they will not give up on this quest, and how even when doing the right thing is hard, they won't give up on doing it. And I was just struck by it. And then also how Tolkien really has an elevated view of beauty. This one passage that when Sam and Frodo are just trudging along, and all of a sudden there is this statue, and even the head has fallen off it, and in the midst of all of this gray and gloom, there are flowers growing around the statue, and this halo of light from the sun shines down on it, and they're just struck by the immense beauty. And Frodo says something like, they can't win forever. The darkness can't win forever. And so I was just so in awe of the poetry of this series. And I just love that it is such a really solid, compelling storyline about good versus evil, but the language in it is so incredibly rich. So now what I'm really excited, I feel like the dessert is the return of the king. All the loose ends tied in, and all of the sad things made untrue, as Samwise says. And just Sam is my favorite character. So I'm already sad that I'll be done with this series, and I haven't even read the third book. So many, many times in my life, I hope to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, maybe at least every other year or so. I find the more books I read, the more I long to go back to the favorites and reread. So I'm even going to do a whole video on the rereading I did this year. I finally this year decided not to include rereads in my favorites of the year, because I realized no one else does that. Plus I have too many other favorites to tell you about. So yes, you can see I'm just glowing talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And now Petra from the channel Petra U has made me really interested in reading Baron and Luthien. And I think Christie Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space has also read that. So I think after I finish The Return of the King, I can feel a little bit less sad about not being able to continue because I can have Baron and Luthien. And especially it's referenced, Baron and Luthien, I forgot, is referenced in The Two Towers towards the end in a conversation between Sam and Frodo. And also I jumped off my track talking about The Hobbit. I forgot how amazing it is and how fast paced. And Peter, I read it to him a couple years ago, but he didn't remember all that much. So it was like he was experiencing it for the first time. And just Andy Serkis does all of the songs that are in there, and he did the Misty Mountain tune that they did in the new Hobbit films, which I know the new Hobbit films are a bit of a train wreck, but I think the great thing that came out of those is their rendition of the Misty Mountain. So thank you everyone for sticking with me. If you have watched my wrap-ups throughout the year, thank you. And thank you for the comments that you leave and just doing book life with me. And I will be back with some wrap-up videos. And yeah, thanks as always for watching and have a great 2022.